Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Employment Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Cal Corkery, Chair of this committee again after a short enforced absence. I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the following. As per usual, a few housekeeping bits. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by the Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. To comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, if you signed into the Guildhall, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. This meeting will be live streamed and that camera zooms in to show the speaker. This is linked to the microphones, therefore please can I remind all attendees to turn on their microphones to speak and then off again once you have finished the meeting. And once you finish speaking even. Members of the public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. Deputations, there are no deputations that have been received for this meeting, therefore move on to the agenda. The first item is apologies for absence. Received apologies from Councillor Matt Atkins, and I think the rest of us are here. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Any interest to declare, members? Nope. Okay, moving on swiftly. Actually, before we move on, let's jump back and go around to do introductions, because I missed that bit out. So, obviously I've introduced myself. My name's Cal Corkery. I'm one of the councillors on the committee and chair. If we start round on my left at the back, Jane.
I'm Jane Didino, Local Democracy Officer.
Okay, thank you.
Dave Ashmore, one of the Fratton councillors.
Thank you.
Gerald Allen Jackson, one of the Milton councillors.
Thank you. Simon.
Councillor Simon Boshi, Drayton and Farlington.
Councillor Darren Sanders, Baffins Ward.
And if we go back row, please.
Linda Martin, Corporate Health and Safety Manager.
Rochelle Williams, Human Resources.
Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Great, welcome everyone. Right, moving on. Item 3, minutes of the meeting of the 15th of February 2023. So I was temporarily not on the committee at that time, so I wasn't here. But for those that were here, do people agree those minutes is an accurate? Yep, agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Right, moving on swiftly. Item 4, the pay policy statement for 2023-2024. And I believe this has been introduced by Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Resources. Oh, no, it's not. It's been introduced by Rochelle.
Thank you. So this is the, as Councillor said, pay policy statement 23-24. It's a statutory report required as part of the Localism Act and Transparency Code. The data in the report is based on data as at the 31st of March 2022. I won't go into all the detail in the report, as I assume you've read that and got access to it. What we would draw members' attention to is the changing shape of the workforce and operating environment of our City Council and the need for officers to work across organisational boundaries, including our arrangements with health and other local authorities, which do have an impact on our pay policy position. So any questions?
Thank you, Michelle. Members, any questions? This is obviously a statutory report that we have to bring every year. I think it's usually relatively straightforward, but if there's anything people want to ask about or comment upon. Yeah, that's right. It'll be passed on to full council once it's gone through this committee. Okay. Right, thank you, members. So the recommendations are set out in paragraph 2 of the report. If I find those, the Employment Committee is recommended to approve the pay policy statement as attached in Appendix 1 and to go forward for approval by full council prior to the 31st of March. And I think it's on the agenda for next week. I'm happy to propose these recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ben Jackson. Members, is this agreed? Agreed. Great. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 5. It's a gender pay gap report for 2022-23. And who is introducing this one? Rochelle as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the Gender Pay Gap report for 22-23. Again, it's a statutory report and the format is largely provided to us to enable the government to analyse the results. However, members have previously requested an additional breakdown in relation to the statutory information by age, and that's outlined in Appendix 1. Just as a reminder, the gender pay gap is a measure of labour market or workplace disadvantage expressed in the terms of comparison between male and female's average hourly rate. It should be noted that our workforce is predominantly female, so 70-30 split, and the data can be perceived as skewed as women dominate each age bracket of our data. Although women are more likely to work part-time, we have seen a decrease in women working part-time from the last time we reported this to you by 406. This could be a result of the more flexible and hybrid ways of working that have been enabled as a result of the pandemic and the technology that we've been able to implement as a result. The Council is confident that its gender pay gap does not stem from paying male and female employees differently for the same or equivalent work, rather as a result of the roles in which male and females work within the Council and the salaries that these roles attract. This is reflected across the UK economy, where we still find that males are more likely to hold senior positions, and that's the basis of our action plan. And again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Members, any questions or comments on this report? I've got one question, just out of interest, something I picked up. The table on, I think, the third page of the report talks about differences in bonus pay, but the pay policy statement says that we don't pay bonuses. Could you just explain that, please?
Yes, we can. So the criteria for pay policy statement versus gender pay gap report are different. So for the pay policy statement, for the purposes of that, we as a City Council do not pay bonuses. We don't have a bonus scheme in place, and our obligations under that paper are to report the pay mechanisms that we have or expect to have for the year going forward. In relation to the gender pay gap report, the areas that we focus on in terms of what they classify could be perceived as a bonus are long service award and one-off honorarium payments. Those are classified differently in the pay policy statement. So we have tried to pick that up in the text because we thought somebody would notice that we said we don't have them, and then we report on them in the other one. But that's the difference. It's just in terms of the criteria set at the statutory level.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, members? No? Okay. In that case, move on to the recommendations. So, recommendations are that it's recommended that the Employment Committee first note the key findings of the Gender Pay Gap report, and secondly note the action plan as set out in item 8 of the Gender Pay Gap report. I'm happy to propose those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Darren, your hand is first. Thank you very much. Members, is this agreed? Agreed. Yep. Thank you very much. Moving on swiftly. Item 6, we've got the sickness absence report.
Me again. So the committee agreed to move to a biannual absence report, and this is the first report in the revised format. We've tried to retain the information that members previously found useful and have provided further insight into the reasons for absence, the interventions for absence, both across the council and in relation to specific directorates, as well as providing some information regarding specific job roles and correlation to other demographic data such as age, where this is relevant. We also outlined the actions taking place to promote employee well-being, so it's a much longer report which gives you much more detail. In summary, overall we've seen a slight reduction in absence levels, and that's predominantly due to long-term absence reducing. We have seen an increase in some of the short-term absence, and when we look at the reasons for that absence, it very much correlates with what's happening in the wider population, and public health are kind of on board. We're seeing the viruses, coughs, cold, flus, those sorts of things. The report outlines the top reasons for absence. It gives you details about job roles and the interventions. So I could go into more detail. I'm happy to take questions if people have got questions on anything specific or any feedback in relation to the new format of the report that we can take forward.
Thank you, Michelle. Members, any questions or comments?
I think it's useful to see the numbers going down. Is there a particular issue why the long-term sickness is falling? Is that particularly an intervention that we've done or anything like that?
We certainly have been using the data. So we had a little bit of a gap in terms of the data that we could get because of our transition from one previous system to the Fusion system. So now we have access to that data. We're able to essentially target our energies to where we can be most effective and provide that level of support. And we've given an example in the paper of being able to return people to work quicker. So it's a more targeted approach from HR and the services with better availability of data and focusing on the areas where we can have a genuine impact in helping people return to work quicker.
Great, thank you very much. Just a question from me then, if there's no questions from the other members of the committee. Going back over the past couple of years in terms of sickness absence reports, especially during the pandemic, there was quite a significant improvement in levels of sickness absence. And at the time, I think we've had discussions within this committee around the kind of potential reasons for that, around flexible working, etc. I just wondered if, in your opinion, that's continuing as a trend. Is that kind of an impact on the level of sickness absence around kind of flexible working and the way in which ways of working have changed?
It certainly is having an impact because the technology that we've got, the ability we've got to be able to work from home enables more people to work when they otherwise would have phoned in sick. But there are clearly areas where that's not possible, and we're still seeing a slight skew in the data, I guess, in areas such as adult social care frontline services, where if they are testing for COVID, for example, there's still a requirement for them to refrain from work for a period of 5 days. So that still is having an impact there. But in terms of the hybrid working, yes, I think it is still having an impact, and it's something that we want to retain. It's certainly something that our staff tell us whenever we survey them. It's a positive benefit, but it is something that we are going back up for an annual staff survey shortly, aren't we? So it's something we'll pick up as part of that as well to gain a new insight now we're further along the road. But yes, flexibility tends to breed the most attendance levels and giving people the control to manage their time and their work and their health.
Great, thank you very much. Darren.
Thanks, Cal. Two things. Firstly, the psychological group remains the chief reason why people are absent. Is that more of a short-term or long-term absence that it leads to, or is it a bit of both? And what are we doing to fix it?
It's certainly a bit of both. What we're doing in terms to fix it, and to note on that, we've got separated between the work-related and non-work-related. Non-work-related is higher as a percentage than the work-related. What we're doing as part of that, we note in the report some of the interventions in terms of Solent Mind and the work that they're doing with us. We've undertaken health and wellbeing checks with areas of the organisation that are traditionally hard to reach. To support those, we have our EAP provider, which we're just out to tender for a new provider in relation to that. And we also have occupational health. So anything with psychological reasons, our advice is day one referral, so that we understand, unless it's reactive, so in terms of a situational grief, where there's, we understand the reasons for the absence. If it's work-related, it will be day one referral to occupational health. We also have a wellbeing risk assessment that our colleagues in health and safety and our wellbeing coordinator put together, which provides a wellbeing plan for managers and staff to work together to try and understand what's happening. And if you look at the job roles where those areas are high, it's the children's social care social workers, adult social care social workers. So we're working with those services on their recruitment and retention at the very beginning of the contract, because what we see is where we've got gaps in the numbers, the caseloads go up, the stress, anxiety, so we need to break that cycle. So our energy with those services at the moment is very much focused on the recruitment side, so we're getting the right people into the organisation with the right support, with the right training. One of the other things we've just launched at the beginning of the year, it's noted in the report, is the new managers induction programme. We say new managers, we're playing a huge amount of catch-up really because of the pandemic as well. Lots of people were recruited to that time and didn't have the induction they would have ordinarily have had. As part of that, there's a whole session on wellbeing and managing attendance and HR policy and process. So we're hoping by raising awareness of the support, the resources that are available, we'll be able to support our staff much quicker.
Yeah, because I mean, if the chief reason is non-work related stress, anxiety and depression, I think colleagues may disagree that the key thing is to have an encouraging culture so those things can be reported early, because the easiest thing is for both men and women who are on the receiving end of that to bottle that up, essentially, and that affects work performance. So is that culture cascaded down through all levels of management?
Yeah, absolutely. And from our perspective and the feedback that we've got from staff, what they've been asking for are support networks in the workplace. And so just this week, I think we're going out with some comms when Natasha's seen it and approved it, regarding a dad's work group, for example, have come forward in the workplace and how to balance work-life balance, a menopause and a neurodivergent working group. So people who have children or themselves have a neurodiversity that can come together. So really trying to get in place that culture of support with peers, rather than there just being a reliance on the manager, employee or HR employee or trade unions. So really trying to get that cross-peer support as well.
No, I think that's really good. And I also think, Cal, it's one of the things that union reps can also should flag up frequently. Because if they're picking up, people might go to the union rep and might not go to the management. And that's something I think we can flag up and try and have both sides working on that. My other thing was around coronavirus. You've separated out long COVID from coronavirus. The two of them together are about 18% of all absences, so it's a real total. Is there a specific reason why long COVID has been separated out from other coronavirus cases?
So
it's the group on the right-hand side that the table you've done.
Yeah, so the coronavirus is the sort of the short term, particularly those that work in adult social care, that are required to abstain from work for that 5-day period. And the coronavirus itself tends to be a shorter term. Long COVID is a diagnosed long-term condition and tends to go on for a considerably long period of time, months, rather than a week or 2 weeks when you're feeling a bit poorly, which is why we've separated it out. There is also a working group with colleagues from public health and the NHS that are continuing to work and look into long COVID, the causes and the prognosis around long COVID cases that we're also plugged into. So we are keen to understand the long COVID as a separate condition to other causes of illness.
Okay. I'm interested in, following on from that, I'm interested in abstaining from work for 5 days. Is that a PCC policy, or is that part of what used to be called Public Health England guidance? Or the rules?
Yeah, no, it's a local policy that we've implemented in our care settings where staff are working with people who are who during the pandemic would have been classed as vulnerable, so our residential care over 75.
Okay, so in other words, if somebody's in a care home, they don't go into a care home for 5 days. It's that sort of thing rather than the more desk-based approach, whereby for some people they would
absolutely.
be able to.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Do
It doesn't apply to desk-based roles. It's only to those roles where staff are working with people who are vulnerable.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very helpful. Thanks for that, Cal.
The other thing I thought might be worthwhile adding is the focus on the new managers induction is also about making sure that our management population, not just from a recruitment point of view, but people who are newly promoted are imbued in that supportive culture. But it's also incumbent on us as senior managers to be role modelling how we approach absence. And your point about the unions, we do meet regularly with the unions, and in fact some of the menopause activities have come about as a result of the unions raising and flagging it with us, as well as being a woman of a certain age, of course, so it's dear to my heart. So role modelling in action.
I will accept that it is down to the unions.
Right, thank you very much. Any further comments or questions, members? No. Okay, another positive report, thank you. Good to see the trends continuing to increase or improve. I guess we're never going to ever reach zero sickness absence, and probably you wouldn't want that anyway, because you want people to feel able to take that time off if and when they need it, if they're not fit enough to work. So thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the recommendations. We've got 3 recommendations, the first of which is to note the change in absence levels across the organisation. Secondly, to note the levels and causes of sickness absence across the council and by directorate. And thirdly, to note the activities and interventions undertaken to support attendance. I'm happy to propose those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Simon, thank you very much. Members, is that all agreed? Perfect, thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 7, health and safety training deep dive. And I think this is off the back of a previous discussion at Employment Creative where we'd asked for a bit more information about some figures that we were curious about. So, Linda, can I ask you to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The committee receives this report further to the request to ascertain why there was a significant reduction in health and safety training completion rates. As a result of this review and rerunning the data, it was found the reason for the reduction is a result of an anomaly in the information presented. The year-on-year figures were not comparable. The reports have been rerun and presented within the papers that you received today. They show that staff have completed training as per the cyclical requirement for refresher training. The committee also asked about online training compared to face-to-face training. Face-to-face training is delivered when a practical element is required, such as manual handling training for people or loads. Online training has been successfully adopted for other health and safety courses. Going forward, the new proposed learning management system and risk profiling that we're undertaking will enable us to target training more appropriately and report on it accordingly. Any questions?
Thank you, Linda. Members, any comments or questions? I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but thank you very much for going away and doing that piece of work. Obviously, there was an anomaly previously, however you say it, but it's useful to kind of understand the reasons behind that and see that it's now being corrected for the record. Thank you. So that's just an information report. No recommendations on that, I don't think. Okay, yeah, so this information is just for noting. Moving on, item number 8, we've got a report from the Member Training Working Group, and I think we've got James Harris making a special appearance here to report back.
Thank you, Chair. Not sure I call it a special appearance, but we'll see how I perform. So thank you, Chair. The report before the committee is an information report for noting and is following the work undertaken by the Member Training Working Group. For newly elected members, the group supported an induction evening from 6 p.m. on the Monday following the elections. This year, that Monday is a bank holiday, so it will be held on the Tuesday. The purpose of the evening is for newly elected members to receive their required code of conduct training, an opportunity to hand in the forms that they would have received on the election night, have their photograph taken so they can be put onto the website so people can see who they are, as well as having email addresses, to receive building passes, car park access passes, and most importantly their IT equipment, and to receive training in their IT equipment. So they'll leave with their IT equipment working and able to access Fusion, for example, in order to access their pay advice slips. To provide some real-life experiences, which is something the Member Training Working Group highlighted, the group favoured an honorary alderman be invited to explain a little bit about the role of being a councillor. This matter was further discussed with group leaders, who suggested that I contact 3 honorary aldermen, which I've done, and the 3 named honorary aldermen have all accepted the invite to attend to deliver a sort of triple act for new members. For the general training offer, the group favoured a hybrid approach that allows members to join remotely or in person, whichever is most convenient. Training typically starting at 5 or 5:30. Training itself has been classed into a few different sections of compulsory, recommended and optional, as detailed within the report. As an update to the report, there will be a local government finance training session on the Thursday following the elections, again hybrid at 5:30. And also training on spotting the signs of modern slavery, an invite to which existing members was sent today, but that date, along with the date of the induction evening and the finance training, will be given to election agents to pass on to candidates so that they get the date in the diary as soon as possible, should they be returned. Finally, it should be noted that Culture and Leisure Directorate provide a pack for new members, that will continue. And also there will be a health and safety module as well offered to councillors to attend. That's all I have by way of introduction, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, James. Members, any comments, questions? Darren, we'll go to you as you were on the working group, I believe, and then we'll move over to Simon.
So I was happy for Simon to go first. But anyway, yeah, so just a bit of the logic behind what is going on, and I'm pretty sure the four of us thought the same thing. The idea was, one of the problems we faced is that some councils, particularly new councils, found it very difficult to get up and running quickly enough. So there have been some delays, particularly with access to computers, access to the IT systems, access to Outlook. And that seems wrong because the democratic role starts pretty much on day one. Hence the need to have a pretty comprehensive session pretty early on, which includes things like photographs and all that sort of stuff. The idea of the honorary aldermen and women coming in came particularly from Councillor Madgwick, because again the idea was to get someone who wasn't a member of a current group but who would be respected by various people to come in and actually just explain the situation and offer a bit more realism and a bit more honesty than maybe done elsewhere. We put the training in 3 separate stages, again because of the nature of the roles that new councillors face pretty much from day one. So issues such as, how does the council actually work? Safeguarding, diversity, anti-discrimination, modern slavery are things that need to be done pretty much from day one because the pressure will come from day one. We wanted also to try and improve the overall quality of the training that was occurred. I think each of us had different levels of experience with regards to different committee training, and so that was crucial. And also to get the role of scrutiny in very, very early, because that is a key part of the authority, and once it's back up and running fully, then life will become a little bit easier. And from then on in, it becomes more optional. But the principles were to try and get new councils' democratic duties up and running as fast as possible, and also to try and make sure they understand the organisation as quickly as possible. One particular thing that people from all groups had noted was that particularly with several new councils, some of them found it quite difficult to have the proper interactions with officers, and so that's why a key thing is around the member officer protocol, so people's understandable desire to get everything immediately is tempered with the issues that face the public sector and local government. I think I've got that right, James. If I haven't, it's okay, you can shake your head as well, I don't mind. Then that's fine, but I think there was great consensus amongst the four of us actually around what to do and the principles behind it. So I thought I'd just elucidate the principles behind it to colleagues.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Darren, when you find out how the council works, could you let me know?
I think that's 6 o'clock on the Tuesday after the elections on.
Right. I've got a couple of comments and perhaps a couple of questions as well. Perhaps I'm being a little bit light-hearted, but do you really think that 35 minutes is about the right time for 3 ex-councillors to talk about their experiences?
Without pushing your ones off.
Yes. Is that why you pitched it and it's cut off there? I'd say from my perspective, it's about time too, I think, because it's never really been structured. I think the last time there was a sort of structure was probably about 10 or 15 years ago, when we all used to meet in the Lord Mayor's banqueting suite to all do the oath together like some sort of collective, and then sign the book and get our photographs taken, and that was about it. But the interesting thing that you made a comment about there, Darren, was officer member protocol and the interaction. I think whatever information that comes out of that will be useful to go council-wide, not just to new members, because certainly since coronavirus and the pandemic, there's been a bit of a churn in officers and points of contact, and of course a lot of it has moved to emails and stuff like that. And certainly from my perspective, an understanding of points of contact for various issues would be very useful, again, from a council-wide perspective. Because certainly I tend to find that if you're not quite sure where it goes, you default to the director or the senior manager and rely on them to push it in the appropriate direction. Certainly if you're in opposition, so you don't have that day-to-day interaction with that sort of staff. So certainly looking at it from the point of view of new members, but I'd perhaps request that we keep half an eye on it and say, would this be relevant for something that could be pushed out from a council-wide point of view? Because that would certainly improve the efficiency of communication in a lot of instances, I think, and I think that would be a very useful place to be.
Thanks, Simon.
Just to come back up, it's up to James and the team to take it forwards from here, but I would certainly want those points noted. I think it is a particular concern, the Liberal Democrat group, ironically, around the member officer protocol and making sure that that works very well, because we all have pretty bad experience of it not working well in different ways, and people feeling that more can be achieved than it can be achieved. I think just realism across the piece is very helpful, if that's all right, Cal.
Okay, thank you. James, I'm not sure there were any questions there, but is there anything you want to comment on or come back on?
The only thing I would comment on is thank you for the comments, and hopefully this represents a little bit of a step change in the way we do things. But obviously year on year we can learn and develop this, so it's not this isn't it forevermore. It will be a continual evolving and hopefully improving process.
Great, thank you very much, James. Yeah, I think a good and a very useful piece of work and a very necessary piece of work, so thank you to all the members and officers that were involved in bringing this forward. In the absence of any further comments or questions, I think we can move on. So this was just another information report, so no need for approval of any recommendations. So we'll take that as noted. And that brings us to the end of the agenda. So thank you, members. That concludes the business on the agenda for this meeting. Thank you all for your attendance, and I officially close the meeting at 2:31. Thank you all.